The conventional wisdom when learning a language is to start speaking as early as often and do it as much as you can. After all, that's the skill that you want to practice, speaking, right? But I spent over a year learning a language without even trying to form a single thought in the language. But then, everything changed when I started having conversations. So, how did it go? Am I fluent in the language yet? Stick around to find out. And I'm not kidding. July 25th was my very first time speaking in Czech. However, the word speaking can be a little bit misleading. What I mean is output, which we define as putting your thoughts and ideas into the language directly. I did do some pronunciation practice, some reading aloud, and even some speaking along with a podcast. We call this chorusing. But those are really just pronunciation exercises for training your mouth hole and muscle memory. Putting your thoughts into the language output is a totally different beast. And in this video, we're going to explore why that is and talk about what the hell made me take such an unintuitive approach. But first, let's talk about the elephant in the room. How did it go? Well, really well. I wasn't fluent, to nobody's surprise. You can't just open your mouth for the first time and expect it to be perfect. But I had a conversation. A real, jerky and halting conversation. Nemám žádný slova v myšlenky.
V hlavě.
V hlavě. Mhm. Ale. And it was awesome. Even though I was super nervous the entire time, I left the lesson feeling good about what I'd done and wanting to continue. Ale nemluvím tak plynulý.
Nemluvím tak plynule. Super.
But the most important part of the lesson is not what I said, but what I understood. Because I understood about 95% of what my teacher said to me. And that's what made it a real conversation. See, there are two sides to a conversation. You have to be able to speak your thoughts and understand what the other person says to you, or else it's just a monologue, right? You're not actually having a conversation. I think this is a good analogy for it, so bear with me for a second. Imagine that you want to learn to play the guitar. It might seem like your entire goal is just to learn to play the guitar. One skill, one thing you gotta do. But there's actually a bunch of different skills that build up to being able to play the guitar. For example, being able to physically play the guitar with your hands and being able to understand and play music as a whole. Someone who's played the violin or piano their entire life is going to have a much easier time picking up the guitar because all they have to learn is new muscle movements, basically. They already understand how music works and they can use their past to make that part easier. But if you've never touched an instrument before in your life, you're also going to have to figure out things like rhythm and how to play music and how to understand a song and that kind of thing. Learning to speak a language that you understand basically perfectly is a lot more like the first scenario. You come in and you're able to understand what's happening in the conversation, whether it's with music or with a language like Czech. But the language isn't new to you, whether it's a language of music or a language like Czech. I already had the fundamentals of a conversation in Czech totally down, so I'm just working on the execution. And because of that, I improved incredibly rapidly. Here's a clip from just a few days after that first chat. Nejsou hodně lidí, kteří mluví plynule jazyky, asi tak mám zájem o obsah na všechny jazyky, chci říct. Ano. I felt way more confident and natural, and it showed. And I actually met with that first teacher again a week after our first conversation, and she specifically commented on how much more relaxed and natural I sounded.
Ale minulou lekci jsi byl víc nervózní. Já jsem cítila, že jsi takový jako víc v klidu, víc si užíváš tu češtinu a šlo ti to lépe o něco. Věděla jsem, jak nejsi tak jako v tenzi, že už to šlo lépe, ty myšlenky ven.
And my progress continued. Pretty much every day, I felt better and it was easier to express my thoughts. I even had an entire conversation about why I hadn't learned pretty much any grammar before, and that I hadn't prepared ahead of time.
Ale ty máš velkou výhodu v tom, že už si trénoval poslech a čtení velmi dlouho, takže já si myslím, že pro tebe ta gramatika už nebude tak těžká. Protože už máš nějakou představu v hlavě, už...
I don't sound like a beginner. It doesn't seem like I've only been speaking for a few weeks. And to test that, I found a brand new teacher who I'd never spoken before with a lot of experience. And about 10 minutes into the call, I asked him to guess how long I'd been learning. And he took it fairly seriously. He asked a couple of follow-up questions and then made his guess.
To záleží, protože ty určitě jsi původně z Ameriky, je tak?
Ano.
Jo. Ale mluvíš několika jazyky, že jo?
Ano, taky.
Víš, jak se učí jazyk, že jo?
Ano.
Myslím, že to nebude hodně. Já dal bych ti, ale mluvíš velmi dobře, je to perfektní, je to super. Přízvuk je super, gramatika super, zajímavý slova, bezvá bomba, skvělý.
Bomba.
2-3 roky.
2-3 roky. OK. Jenom mám trošičku 500 dní.
500 dní.
Tak to je rok a půl. Ale jenom mám 3 týdny s mluvením. Protože...
Tleskám. Bomba.
Děkuju. 2 to 3 years. And that's only after about a year and a half of learning. I bring this up not to brag, but to address the efficiency question. To a lot of people, it seems counterproductive to not practice the thing that you want to get good at. Putting in lots of time on the skill that you want to get good at, in this case speaking, is how you make progress. And if you don't do that, you're not going to make progress, right? But that's not how it plays out, which we're going to talk about, but I want to share just a few more clips before we get to that. Because I've not only been doing lessons, I've also been doing some talking to camera to get my thoughts out there. And it makes for a really good before and after shot. Here's what I sounded like on day 1. Chci zlepšovat. Zítra mám lekce. And this is just a few weeks later. Ahoj, dobré ráno. Dneska chci mluvit o svoji češtině, protože myslím si, že vylepším docela rychleji a chci vysvětlit věci o svoji metoda. I do have plenty of pauses, have to look up words and make a bunch of mistakes, but it feels relatively fluid and I can keep talking about things. Okay, that's the last clip for the entire video, I promise. But if you want to see some unedited clips of me speaking, check the links in the description. All right, let's talk about why. Why did I wait 500 days before speaking to anyone? And I think it breaks down into 2 main reasons: efficiency and fun. So there are 2 main abilities to language learning, maybe input and output, or communication, being able to speak something, and understanding, being able to understand something. Those are the core abilities that we're looking at. They do include a bunch of sub-skills, but we're focused on the broad skills of being able to understand the language and being able to communicate your ideas in the language. Input is usually reading and listening, and output is usually speaking and writing. Imagine these skills are represented by balls, and we'll put them on a graph. The higher up they are, the better you are at that thing, and the lower down, the worse. And then left and right is time, so your ability over time. But the thing is, these balls aren't separate and free to move around at any point on the graph. They're connected. If one goes up, the other tags along. If the other falls, so does the other. But the thing is, these balls aren't equal in size and weight. The input one is like a bowling ball, and the output one is like a tennis ball. This is because your input ability is the limiting factor. If you try to pull up on the tennis ball, that bowling ball really isn't going anywhere. It can stretch to the end of the string, but then it will break before it actually pulls the ball with it. And this is why somebody focusing only on speaking can make very fast progress. The balls are really light and quick and easy to move. You can learn to say hello and introduce yourself in less than an hour. But you're going to hit the end of that string very, very quickly and stop making any progress. Lamont discussed this in one of his videos. He realized that his Swedish hadn't been improving for like a year when he went back and looked at videos. It wasn't until he started focusing on the bowling ball, on his input ability, that he was able to make progress again. But if you focus on moving that bowling ball first, it's going to drag the tennis ball along with it. Yes, the tennis ball is dangling at the end of its rope, but it is still moving. And that's the main idea behind waiting to speak. You focus on moving the big heavy ball first, and then when you go to move the tennis ball, or your speaking ability, you realize that it's not that far behind already. The other reason, like I mentioned, is fun, but that might be the wrong word. Maybe satisfaction is a better word. I like to imagine there being a line of satisfaction somewhere on the graph. When your abilities are below that line of satisfaction, it's frustrating and you don't really want to continue. It's not very fun or satisfying to do. And when your abilities are above, it's great, right? You can keep going. Everybody's line is going to be a little bit different depending on their personality. It's also going to be different for different skills. You might actually enjoy watching a movie where you miss half the dialogue, or that could sound like your own personal hell. Most people can push through a little bit of learning when it's below that line of satisfaction, but it's still a bit of a struggle and hard to keep going long term because it's not that satisfying. But going out bowling with your friends can be pretty fun even if you're terrible. It's got a lower line of satisfaction. You can laugh, get a few drinks, make fun of each other for how bad you are, and still have a good time. Same goes for learning to understand a language. You can watch the pretty pictures, things that are interesting to you, or use some tools, sort of like the gutters, to make it a little more engaging. But going out to play tennis with a professional player, to sweat in the sun and get balls whacked at you, is a lot more stressful for most people. But thankfully in language learning, these are connected skills. You can just go bowling until it drags your tennis ability over that line of satisfaction. That way, when you start speaking, it's a lot more engaging. Sure, you're still bad, but you're having a lot more fun. Because I've been having a lot of fun with my output. Yeah, I still make plenty of mistakes, but they don't feel like holes in my knowledge. They feel like things that I'm just getting used to. It's a lot more satisfying. Focus on understanding and having fun with the language, because once you can have fun in the language, you're never going to want to stop. I was pretty easily able to put over 1,000 hours into Czech because I was doing interesting things. Reading books, watching movies, getting attached to characters in soap operas. And at this point, when I'm speaking, it's kind of fun and I want to keep going. No part of the process has felt like a real grind where I have to study and learn the language. It's all been fun. Now, all that being said, it's not the best choice for everyone. When should you start speaking earlier in the process? The biggest and most compelling reason is because you want to, or you need to for some reason. Lots of people learn a language in order to communicate with specific people, whether that's at work or home or just the local shops or because you're an extrovert and just need to communicate with people. Any of those reasons are totally valid. There are probably dozens or hundreds of reasons somebody might want to speak earlier in the process. And that's totally fine. Go for it. But make sure that you're also dedicating enough time to moving that bowling ball so that you don't fall behind in your other skills. And if you're somebody who really wants to speak earlier but also kind of wants to wait, try crosstalk. It's really rewarding and I think underutilized, especially if you can find somebody else who's a beginner in the language to have some fun, slow conversations with each other and make a little friendship. Now, like with a lot of things, the answer to whether you should or shouldn't speak earlier or later isn't black or white. It's not a yes or no question. The answer lies somewhere in the middle. But that doesn't stop people from taking more extreme stances. And sometimes this stems from a miscommunication about terminology. When some people hear wait to speak, they interpret it more like don't speak until you're 100% perfect in everything, which is not what we're recommending. Another reason for going to extremes might be fear. There are a lot of people who are afraid of having a bad accent or not sounding native-like enough. And that's totally reasonable. Feeling insecure and not wanting to face the difficulty of learning to speak are some totally human emotions. But the answer is not to just wait and wait and wait. You do at some point have to start speaking to train up these abilities that you want to get good at. Sucking at something is the first step to being sort of good at something. And the same goes for the opposite. Some people feel like you have to be able to speak or write something in order to be able to learn it and understand it. And that if you're not speaking, you're damaging the neurological connections of learning a language. But this isn't true. If it were, there are millions of people in the world that are breaking this rule. Plenty of people in multilingual countries can understand well, great, or even perfectly other languages from their own without really being able to speak them because they just speak in their own native language. Sometimes those languages are very similar, but not always. And that wouldn't take into account the thousands of people that have had great success, myself included, learning a language without speaking much at all in the beginning. I'm not recommending that you never learn to speak the language and just wait until you're magically fluent. And I'm personally feeling great about my progress. I've got something like 25 hours of output so far, and I'm really proud of how far I've come. When I was looking at the clips of myself speaking to find the ones for this video, I was shocked by how bad I was a couple of weeks ago. So maybe just saying that I'm happy with my progress is a bit of an understatement. I'm thrilled with how far I've come, but I'm not satisfied yet. I'm not done with my journey, not even close. I'm really looking forward to improving more and eventually going to the Czech Republic next year. I'm going to continue focusing on my output in a few different ways. The first one is to continue with what I've been doing for a little while. My initial estimate was that I needed about 50 hours to become comfortable speaking, but I think that's actually closer to like 30 or 35. I'm at the point where I feel fairly comfortable with what I already can do, but I want to focus on my errors and mistakes and get better at it. And to do that, I've actually started writing my own grammar primer for Czech, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that all of the materials out there are super dense and I don't like them that much. I haven't found them that useful. And the second reason is that making a guide proves to you, or to me, that I understand well enough to make a simple explanation for something that's fairly complicated. So I'm going to keep working on that so that I understand why and how the grammar is used to mean things. And then I'm going to start focusing a lot more on error correction and improving my accuracy in the language. Accuracy is your ability to produce correct output that sounds grammatically correct to native speakers. I'm going to be converting all of my lessons into some kind of correction class, so make sure that you subscribe to see breakdowns of all of those different techniques that I do in the future. And this has been fantastic. I'm already feeling the results. I'm understanding the grammar better, I'm able to use it more accurately, and notice when somebody makes a correction or they do it right themselves, and internalize that a lot better. It's also a lot more interesting because I actually care now, and words like locative and accusative aren't as annoying. Alright, so before I wrap up this video, I want to throw a couple of rapid fire tips out there for output. The first one is, don't wait until you feel ready. You're ready before you really feel like it, and you might get stuck in this eternally waiting loop thing. I recommend setting a milestone or a certain point when you're just going to start, regardless whether or not you feel ready. The second one is to invest in lessons with native speakers. I know this can be really expensive, but it is so beneficial to put something on the calendar and just know that you'll get your time in when you go, than trying to schedule everything yourself. There are some activities you can do on your own. Again, I'll be making videos about those, but they're a lot harder to start, they take more energy, and you can be more consistent if you have these scheduled times when you're going to speak with someone. Tip 3 is not to worry too much about your mistakes. You are going to make mistakes in the beginning, so forget about them. You can fix them later. Focus on having fun, getting your ideas out there, and getting your mouth around this brand new language that you're speaking. Mistakes can come later. And finally, if someone gives you a compliment, take it. What you're doing is awesome. You're learning to speak a foreign language. That's really cool. Okay, I think I've gone on long enough for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and comment down below with your output journey. What have you enjoyed? What's been really hard and what's been not so much fun? Thank you so much for watching, and mnie se hezky, uč se česky, ahoy. Oh, and as always, happy immersing.
I'm here to drop some knowledge, listen up with your ears. I got a language learning method, gonna make it crystal clear. It's called Refold, the game changer, gonna blow your mind.
And I'm not kidding. July, whoop, that was too far. From a beep, 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 beep. We'll fix it in post.